you're really trying to stand out in the market, if you're trying to showcase your expertise in a different way, have premium pricing as part of your business model and your offer, and get very clear on who you're serving and serving best, you better believe emotion needs to be part of it.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to this Business Monday episode of A Call to Leadership. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, your host. I'm so glad you are here. Well, some of us are in business not just to stay small and keep it all, but to grow beyond ourselves. And it is so daunting, so many different factors in how we scale our businesses. Well, I've invited a special guest to join me, Seema Alexander, who is a dear colleague in the space of helping businesses thrive. Can't wait for you to listen in. This is A Call to Leadership. Seema Alexander, so good to have you on the show.
Oh my God, so excited to be here. And it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for a minute.
I know, 100%. And I wanted to get you in front of our listeners because you have so much to share on your methodology for business, especially helping business, and your passion for business, and really understanding the deep pain that business owners face in very specific spaces. So I'd like to start unpacking that, talk about your unique method, and just talk about ways that we can stand in the gap and continue to help these entrepreneurs to scale, reach the heights that they desire. Because as you know, and I know in this area, is that many are lost. They've experienced some success, and then they get to a roadblock, they get to an impasse. So I'd like to just start with a little bit about, give us a brief understanding of some of the things that you've been helping people with, and maybe some of the pains that they face, because someone listening today is gonna be like, yes, that's me.
Yes, I love this. I love you're just going right in. So let's do it. Nate, I have spent a long time, probably close to 20 years, sort of studying and understanding why businesses fail, why they succeed, and working with close to 1,000 founders at this point. And I found a gap, and I found a real gap when it comes to growth and businesses. And, as probably a lot of you who are listening in, like early stage are all these amazing tools, business model canvas, business planning, all these strategies that you hear early. And then when people think about growing and scaling, they get into this mindset of, okay, I need more people, I need more technology, we need to put processes in place, all obviously super important, right? All things that are, yes, very relevant and needed. But the gap I found was what I'm calling moving from the spaghetti phase of business to intentional growth. And as a listener who maybe, at that stage in business, like you are, in the beginning, trying to figure out how everything works, right? You're a janitor in chief is how I call it, right? So in every aspect, you're trying to bring revenue in the door, trying to validate what your customer, actually get a customer, and on top of that, validate what they actually want, right? So many times in business, you're going out as a generalist and trying to figure it out. And through that process, a lot of times people can see you as a commodity, like you look like everybody else, even though over the years you've gained a ton of expertise and a lot of specialty. But the last thing a lot of entrepreneurs have an opportunity or just don't take the time to focus on is like, all right, what's actually working in the business and what isn't, right? And then more so, how do we want to be seen and positioned in the market so we look different and unique? And we really are honing in on who we serve best and the transformation that we can actually create for these individuals or these businesses or the communities that we serve. Yeah. And so through that process, I was like, man, a lot of times the core sort of the roadblocks, if you will, it's hard people feel like they are in a box if they niche, right? Yeah. People feel like they have to say yes to every opportunity because that's revenue, or else they have this fear of missing out. People, very smart, capable entrepreneurs. I call them change makers, the 1%ers of like trying to have the courage to even go out there, which is amazing in itself. Well, you get caught up in the everyday operations, right? And that's real and normal and all of that. But what the unique method allows entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs to do is step back and say, okay, now that we've been in business 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, it could be at a specific inflection point. How do we step back from all of this and figure out like what's actually our vision today? Because all businesses evolve. Who you are when you first start is never where you end up. That's straight period. You have a lot of learnings in that process, right? Pandemic happens, life happens, health happens. I mean, lots of things, right? You got to get clear on who you serve best and who you actually want to repel, who you no longer serve. And I think that, and we can get into a lot of these things much deeper, but the art, I always say, referrals can kill your business, because when you're not focused on the people that you serve best, people who also you think could be great clients can be the biggest distractions to scale, right? Yeah. And then the third part, which is important in one of the unique indicators, is around your intellectual property. Like, how do we package your IP, right? In a way that people are leaning in and like, wow, like the way they're speaking to me, I know they understand me. They're actually, I've been, like praying for them in a lot of ways,
Right.
And then, and then when we get to the other part of unique, which is how do you amplify it, all your brand messaging and your content that you're putting out, thought leadership, and the way you build strategic partnerships becomes much more intentional.
Yeah.
We can go into a lot of that deeper, but that's the intention. It's at the end of the day, what the unique method does, it helps people step back, refine their business model to where they play to their strengths, and gets them very clear on how to position ourselves in the market so we stand out, we're unique to the market, and it's actually what your market desires. It's not all the assumptions made from the beginning that all of us have done.
Well, you say a lot, and it's all of it is 100% relevant. I'm going to just hang on one thing that you just said for just a little bit, because I'm listening. It's like, yes, step back. We that's a term that maybe we even say cursily, but it is essential, difficult, sometimes impossible, because people are neck deep in their businesses. They're often someone, and I've been there, where you are. I love the chief janitor, right? This is a great word picture to show that you're all over the business, trying to do things that perhaps you shouldn't be doing, and perhaps you're on the brink of success, but you're also on the brink of total collapse. I mean, it's fascinating. Business is so fascinating because no matter where you are in an organization, whether in terms of the life cycle of your organization and the size, whether you're just getting started and you're just trying to eke out a living, right? And like you said, serve everyone, like, the niche or the niche, as some call it. I like how Alex Hermosi puts it with a little tongue in cheek. He says that, you get niche slapped because you need to know who your ideal client is. But that's difficult, especially when you're getting started, because you just need dollars in the door, right? A lot of folks just say, hey, look, I'll serve anyone. And perhaps that's okay in the beginning if you're just getting started. However, as you grow, that model is not sustainable for scale, right? So it does take. There are so many factors, but the stepping back piece, especially if you've been someone listening has been in business for say 3 to 5 years, or 10 years, or even 20, right? To take that time to step back, I call it your discovery phase of leadership. I identify leadership in really 4 parts. Leadership is discovery, influence, and achievement, and it all revolves around a shared purpose, right? So when we are in discovery phase, that's what we're doing. We're stepping back and we're saying, okay, I need to breathe first because perhaps I'm stressed. I need to consider where it is that I've got blind spots. And this is, I think, where the relationships come in for folks like you, folks like me, where we stand in the gap and we say, look, we know that you don't have all the answers. We know that you have blind spots. And where you have blind spots means that you have liabilities. You have potentials for liability. And maybe you're already experiencing those liabilities. When you speak with a present or a prospective client and you ask them to step back, just hang out here for a minute, what are the kind of responses that you get when you want them to just stop for a moment?
By the time they come to me, they know they need it, right, Nate? And that's part of my branding and sort of like how I share what I do, because let's just say this. Okay. So what I love about the people who come to me are they're experts in what they do. They're like uber experts. Like the other day I had somebody, he's been in the energy space for 25, 30 years. He has pipelines, $1 million pipelines, but he's like, you know what? It's just, I have such a lean team. And he's like, I'm all over the place. And he's like, I know if I just got much more clear on my strategy and became much more intentional, all of these things that I've been feeling would just be able to, I feel like I'd have a path going forward. Right. Yeah. And so when I ask people, what I do tell people, and this is where sometimes there is not pushback, but a reframing is I tell them, I'm not a consultant, or the work we do is not in the world of like, we're going to do it for you. Mm-hmm. But if the CEO founder is not involved in this decision-making process, in some of the research that goes into, how do we want to be seen, doing the analysis with us or with me specifically on, when we talk about ideal clients, I'll just share this one little tidbit because you mentioned about the niche. I think in the beginning, it's really hard to find a niche unless you're really going after something and you just are very clear from the beginning and you saw that gap. A lot of tech companies can do that. A lot of service companies, it takes a lot longer. But by the time you're at this inflection point, you should have had 20, 30, 50, 100 clients, right? And part of the process of Unique is that you're looking at it not just of, okay, who's that ideal persona? And like that, you're manifesting Nate in front of me and being like, if I had Nate in my office, like, oh my God, I could transform him. Not that doesn't come, but now it's like, you get like the way that we analyze the clients is like, all right, why did they come to you in the first place? What was the transformation you were able to give to them? Did you enjoy working with them? Did you not? Did they enjoy working with you? How long did you work with them? How much did they pay you? There are 10 sort of core indicators that all of a sudden you start to see trends within your own client base. Yeah. And that's when things move from, wow, we shouldn't be niching to, wow, like we serve this demographic with these problems the best, right? And we have the capabilities in-house to do these sort of transformations. And then it leads to a whole conversation about, wow, this is how we do it differently. And we've done it consistently and our results show it, but we haven't packaged it like that, and we don't speak about it like that. So it starts to shift. So I think the two parts to that initial question of yours is stepping back at the stage, they know they have to, because they're lost, right? They're like, I don't know what to do next. And I know I need the support. And that's huge, right? Because that's self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And not everybody gets there, to your point earlier. But the second part of like, okay, this is not just a do it for you type of thing. This is do it together, because the way that the analysis is done, they have to be part of it or they'll never buy into the strategy. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And as you're talking about that, it gets me thinking about working in your genius, right? We talk about this in leadership. We talk about this in business, but that's really what we're talking about for this particular, the role and model is my ideal client helps me to work in my genius so that I can best serve them, that type, that framework, if you will. And sometimes we shy away from it, but you think about it, like my highest utility, my highest value proposition is for that particular avatar, if you will. In fact, when I was going through preparing to start this show, I have a coach and a team of podcast experts, and I went through an exercise of identifying my ideal client avatar, and it was painful, Seema. It was so difficult because I'm like, well, no, I could help this person and that person. This person would like to listen to the show, and so on and so forth. And the coach is like, no. You have to identify that one ideal person who will this programming, this content will affect them in such a profound way that it's irresistible for them to want to do business with you. And you had mentioned the word transformation, right? It's so important to talk about these transformations because we then are able to have true, real transformation with our ideal. And so going through that exercise for me was so therapeutic. It was very difficult. However, now when I invite a guest to speak, when I have a couple of co-hosts, when I do a solo episode, I am looking at, even through a camera where I can't see anyone, I'm looking at that ideal client avatar. And even as I ask the questions and have the conversation with you per se, right? I'm having the conversation with you on behalf of that ideal client avatar, so that I can extract the wisdom that you have and then place it at the feet of the individual who is absolutely ecstatic to gain this transformation. I think, it's and when you say it like that, then it makes sense, right? Because some people don't realize, number one, how important it is. Two, as you said, that some people know it's important, they're lost. In fact, I really like the folks. And this is actually back to, Hormozi. I've been listening to a lot of Hormozi lately. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Sounds like it.
He told a story about a professor who asked a marketing professor in one of his books on how you would what you would do to stand out in the crowd with your competition if you had a hot dog stand. And a lot of answers came for better location, better taste, better advertising, blah, blah. And of course, the room eventually fell silent, waiting for the professor. And the professor utters two words, says, starving customers. That is your best differentiation strategy, is people who absolutely are starving for whatever it is that you offer. Because a starving customer means that there are no other hot dog stands in the area, no matter how, now, of course, he made the analogy that no matter how bad your hot dogs tasted, you'd still sell out because people are starving to eat. But if you offer a business opportunity for people who are starving for your service in such a profound way, that in your service is so transformational, so good, it's lights out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that because I hear him. I think the starving customer and that analogy makes a lot of sense. But the experience that you were able to give uniquely than every other hot dog stand out there, because of the way that you might have different variety of, the condiments, or the way that you're packaging it, or, the way that the person who's actually hosting you or bringing this hot dog together has like a fun hibachi way of doing it. I think there's a mix of, I love that starving customer idea, because that's true, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier, like people, if you package your brand messaging the right way, and if you're clear on it internally, then literally people are seeking you out, right? You're expert.
Yes.
I think that's where you're headed with that. Yeah. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key, right? Obviously you want your hot dog to be amazing, and you will. But I think that's the idea around the ideal client avatar, is that they know they need you. They just haven't found you.
Yeah, I would add to that too, because I think they always say riches are in the niches, or, and I always say riches and more impact are in the niches. Mm-hmm. And again, going back to this box concept of where people feel like, wait, I can serve everybody, right? The problem with serving everybody is you're serving nobody, because people can't hear you in your message. So when you're putting out marketing material that's so general, to your point, like you're not speaking to everybody over time, and you're going to lose a big part of your audience, even if they are ideal, because they're not hearing the pain you can solve for them. They're hearing these generic sort of messages that they hear from everybody else, right? And the other part, as you get deeper into like, oh wow, like these are the core people I serve best, that means your offers can get deeper and really truly transform what they're seeking versus sort of superficial offers, right? And I think that's also really important to see, is like you make such a bigger impact when you're clear internally where you play at your strengths and where you play at your genius.
Yes. Yes. And even the way you described your example, I think it bears, and for those who are just listening, they wouldn't have seen your body language. But when you were giving the example of, Nate, I can totally transform him and do all these wonderful things for him and his business, like that energy and that passion and that purpose shine through. And even in that moment, I'm like, oh, wow, I feel special, right? Because someone is taking interest in the transformation that I need. And so I think that's a critical element that sometimes is missed in business, is that we take the sense of purpose and meaning and energy and passion out of the experience. Now, some might counter argue and say, well, our business is very straightforward and there shouldn't be any type of sort of emotional, engagement or attachment. And I want to hear your opinion. I would disagree. I'd say we are emotional creatures as humans, right? I mean,
I think that's foundational. If you're not connecting to your business or to your brand, look, people buy from people, not from brands. That's already an established sort of line that many, many people say. But that's because they see their values in you, right? They see like the results that you've done and the way that you're speaking about your clients, your passion, your enthusiasm, right? Like, if you're not connecting with people emotionally, it's really hard to sell them. Again, then you stay in that commodity zone. You're a dry cleaner. You're a dry cleaner. We're fighting on price here, okay? And that's fine. Like if that's the sort of tried and true model, and that's the way you're going to be focused, that you're a commodity business. But if you're really trying to stand out in the market, if you're trying to showcase your expertise in a different way, have premium pricing as part of your business model and your offer, and get very clear on who you're serving and serving best, you better believe emotion needs to be part of it. They need to feel that you understand them. Because if they don't, then again, you're up. Once you have that, there's no competition. Without that, everybody's your competition. So I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, no, agreed. In fact, listeners who have been listening for a while, and you know this, I own an accounting and advisory firm for many, many years. And years ago, we refashioned our mission statement. And the mission statement was refashioned to say this: our mission is to solve your tax and accounting needs so outstandingly that your joy becomes infectious. Now, who in the world would put the words joy and taxes in the same sentence, right? Nobody else, by the way, not that I know of. And joy is an emotion. Also, pain is an emotion. Suffering is emotion, and people feel pain and suffering generally when they think of taxes, right? Or they think of like, oh my goodness, I got to pay the government, whatnot. But the joy isn't necessarily that I had my taxes prepared. That's simply a function of a technical skill. The joy is in the relationship, knowing that you have a team of individuals who are there to help you through this very potentially complicated and stressful season of life, right? Or an annual season of life for many, right? So that guides the behavior of our teams, right? Because folks who do not desire to make that connection of joy and releasing me from that pain may not be our ideal client avatar, right? And that's totally cool, because we've got lots of colleagues, millions of them, by the way, all over the world, who also serve different niches, right? So I don't even look at, years ago, I taught a class called, it was on competitive advantage. It was business policy, but it was crafting strategy and competitive advantage. And I began to retool how I viewed competition. And this is unorthodox, clearly. I mean, especially as an academic and you as someone in the practitioner in the applied world. I started looking at other individuals in business in the same field as colleagues. You've got your niche, you've got your ideal client, you've got your perfect fit, I have mine. It's not going to be the same. Sometimes I'm going to send you the client who is not my perfect fit, and you might say, why are you sending me that client? And vice versa. And I think that's a healthy way to approach business. In fact, I think it's even the Apple way. Apple way isn't trying to beat Microsoft. They're simply trying to find the best possible fit for their ideal client avatar. This is back to Steve Jobs all through day one. And I wonder how, with your clients and how you approach your method, if there's some symbiosis to that, or if there's an alternate strategy that you use.
No, look, it's really incredible, because the first thing in the unique method, right? Like the first three parts of the unique method is your unique indicators. And for you, and just the way you shifted into a vision and a mission that has more emotion, more sense of like who that you're trying to serve. All of a sudden, this is not just, hey, we want to be the best accounting and tax firm in our area and da 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 da. It has so much more meaning. right? And it becomes what I call the unicorn vision. Why I call it the unicorn vision is people are like, oh my God, unicorns are billion-dollar companies. But if you actually look up the definition of unicorn, it's like that, like it allows you to get to something that is like so high in terms of attainability, but like it changes the scope of what you do and makes it almost like a movement, right? And so when you are describing your vision and your mission, like it's all of a sudden it becomes not only inspirational, but strategic, right? And it drives your decision making going forward. Hey, are we curating joy for our clients going forward? Does this next decision does that help us progress and where we want to go? I always say the vision is what you shared, but the mission should include like, all right, we want to impact 100,000 people by X amount of time by doing this. It's the doing of it, right? But I love adding metrics and numbers to the mission part of it because then it becomes more tangible and real. And then you can reverse engineer your strategy to how do we get there, right? And so I think, Steve Jobs has this one quote. I don't want to butcher it, but I use it a lot. I'm very, it's so funny. I'm like, there's certain things that I have in my mind, but he talks about vision a lot. And it's kind of like, if you're clear on your vision, it actually drives you. It picks you up, right? And I always say, like, if you're clear on the days, entrepreneurship, you mentioned this from the beginning, entrepreneurship is hard. It is amazing days. And then holy days, it's like, oh God, I got this amazing client. And the next day they're like, I'm sorry, our budget fell through or something, right? And it happens. Pandemic happens. AI is happening. We can talk about that all you want, because that's a really, really important piece for a lot of people and probably your listeners to hear what's occurring in this revolution. But when you have a clear vision, then it's like, oh, it's what gets me out of bed, right? It's like when you're recruiting people, you're not just recruiting people to come to another accounting and tax firm. You're bringing them into something that's way bigger than themselves and bigger than you. And I think that to me has been such a pivotal moment with clients when they're like, wow, like this is like my manifesto. It changes everything. And then it doesn't make business. It makes it like this is legacy stuff, right? Like it changes the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what Steve Jobs was saying was if you're working on something you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. The vision pulls you.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so good because that's where the direction is matched with as you said, the metrics and the actual objectives and the outcomes that you're reaching on an incremental basis, right? How important is that part of the conversation early on when you're working with a new client?
It's interesting because, it's the step one in the unique method. But what I always tell them is we're going to go through this process and then come back and refine it. Because until you get clear on who you are, what you do best, who you serve best, who you no longer serve, like those core elements, then we come back, you have your original vision and mission, but we refine it because then you're like, wow, like this is actually what we do, and this is how we can make a bigger impact. And like there are people in the financial services industry, or I've worked with operations management companies, and all those things seem so dry. But when you actually put emotion behind your mission and vision and really start to see like, wow, we can, because of the way our business model is now, we can scale this thing. Like we can make a bigger impact. One of my favorite case studies was an international nonprofit called Codespa. Okay. 36-year-old nonprofit. The honorary president is the King of Spain. Pretty impressive, right? If you think about it. But their structure, what they were doing, their focus on scalable poverty alleviation in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. But I was on their board, I'm still on their board, but like the way that they were pitching themselves, it was so unclear. They just kept talking about the projects and but they had no cohesive story. They didn't talk about the transformations. And so they were actually several years ago, one of my first unique method clients. And Nate, now they talk about we help people move from poverty to prosperity. They have Codespa is a name that back in the day had a meaning. Now we have something called the CODE method, CODE, which is their way of creating scalable poverty alleviation in these areas that are the most vulnerable in these countries. And it helped them stand out from so many other international development organizations. the way the CEO and the founder, the executive director of America now speaks to what their organization does and the results and showcases their storytelling, it's changed everything. And so they attribute a lot of this process to, wow, like we've been around so long, but now the level of clarity you were able to give us through this process, the way our partnerships are created, the way we go after, opportunities, the way that we're branding and marketing ourselves is very different, and more cohesive, and it starts to share like the true impact that they're making in this world. Yeah. And so it's been really, and I think that's the fun thing for all entrepreneurs. When you see your work transform either the individuals you serve, the businesses you serve, or the communities you serve, that's the funness of it, right? That's like that momentum. Small wins are really important in business, right? And continue to build off of them, starts to show your credibility even more and more. So
yeah, absolutely. I say small victories build courage, right? Yes. They give us more and more to grow. I love it. So you've worked with pretty big groups. Do you ever work with small groups?
100%. So what I found in this model was we have a consulting side. So that's the higher end, either emerging growth or, these larger nonprofits. But I run a 10-week accelerator program that literally you can be an individual solopreneur. My whole focus is that you are a practitioner. You are an expert in what you do, right? That's all I ask, and that you've had experience with clients, right? You're very good at that. It's not that you're not the best on the business side, but you need that guidance and support in a very proven, structured methodology. Yeah. And so that's the Disruptive CEO Business Growth Academy. Love it. And then now I'm in the process of writing the book. And really helping just build out these frameworks that have been proven multiple times over at this point, to support, those groups for sure. 100%.
I love it. I love your brain. I love your the cerebral aspect, and your systems and your processes and frameworks. I guess we're kindred spirits in that area. How important are frameworks in the development and the scale of business? I know it's a rudimentary question, but it has to be asked.
No, unique, unicorn vision, your niche positioning, and your IP. Your intellectual property or your intelligence package should be your framework, your methodology, or it takes like, hey, we have like 50 offers. Now here's our core, right? But at the end of the day, what a framework allows you to do is say, this is the process that we take people through that will get them from their pain point to the transformation that they're seeking. When you've been in business a certain amount of time, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, your inflection points, you got it is that stepping back that will allow you to see, wow, like this is what we do differently, and how you name it. So I worked with Singer Wealth Management, and it's pretty she has really big plans for her company. And so we came up with the Thrive method for her, because she doesn't focus just on the financials. She's somebody who focuses on life and thriving, and has just a different perspective. She thinks like the industry, and this is the beauty of this, and this is something for all the entrepreneurs to think about. I always say, I always ask two questions. What is it when no one's looking, you're Googling? What nerds you out, right? And a lot of times in business, it's like, I look at business models all the time. I'm just there's things that you get nerded out on because it's your business, right? Yeah. And I think it's really important to start to think about that, because, and looking at sort of those results within your own company, because that's going to allow you to be like, this is how we do it unique and different. If you look at a lot of companies, they have methods or, frameworks, and they use that as part of their marketing and branding to differentiate themselves. And anytime I talk up to any client, I'm like, look, this is a proven method. Here's where you start. Here's where you end. Here's the transformations that you come through this process. That's when people lean in, because or else you're not shooting from the hip every time. Because if you're shooting from the hip every time, it's never going to be scalable. Yeah, no, I love that. The proven process. And I know Wickman talks about that a lot. Gino Wickman in his EOS model as well. And so it's so important. And what it does is it causes everyone to row in the same direction, right? With a great deal of clarity. I recently heard this. You've probably heard this before. System saves you serious time, energy, and money, right? So the
many entrepreneurs go in without systems and without processes, without a unique, and interestingly, they likely have, and you tell me what you've experienced, they likely have a unique methodology. However, they just haven't fleshed it out in a way that is tangible and simply executable and I think part of the reason is because many entrepreneurs, even as they, as CEO founders, as they grow and scale their businesses, there are so many moving parts that they consider them their baby and they're not ready to let go of them. But at the same time, they haven't had the people come into the organization who are experts at identifying systems, processes, operational inefficiencies, if you will. And so you've got to come in, people have to come in who are acutely adept at extracting that information. And I think that's why you mentioned that it's a partnership, right? I'll help extract this, but you've got to work toward implementation.
Yeah, because one of the challenges that a lot of entrepreneurs have when they create their frameworks is it becomes very internal and they don't realize that framework has to speak to their ideal client, right? Like the outcome of your framework has to solve the problem, the core problems for your ideal client, right? So anytime somebody else can come in and analyze sort of like, hey, this is all the work that you've done, like, this is where your passion lies. This is where you guys play to your strengths. This is like, when you look at these other customers that you're like, man, they've been a pain or this or that, like those are important decisions to make, and then will help you develop that framework that makes the most sense for your business and truly stand out uniquely, 100%.
Yeah, I like the scrolling. What are you scrolling? That's an interesting question. I haven't asked that yet. I do a lot of geeking out on the same kinds of things, leadership, business. I spend more time now with my AI bot scrolling through and asking questions about different aspects of leadership and business, and of course, accounting, advisory, and coaching, and all these different pieces to creating models and systems. And I'm sure you're using AI in a very healthy and robust way now as well.
Yeah, I'm a strategic advisor for a hypergrowth AI company, and it's changed everything. So interesting enough, the last 3 years, I've geeked out on sort of the emerging tech world. So there's a lot that happened with the Web3 side of things, and then now with AI, because it impacts business models, because it's going to impact our lives, right? And so it's been initially, I was a novice investor in some NFT projects, and it just went down the rabbit hole of like, holy moly, what's blockchain? What's all these different sort of DAOs and all these various sort of, so I guess like lines of opportunity for businesses. But then AI came around. And because of my partnership with this company and just like going all in, to me, it's much like Web3 is something that we're going to track, and that whole progress will happen over time. I think there's people who are putting the tech before the problems in that space. And I think that will come back to us longer term. AI is transformational today. Okay. And one of the things that I've been doing a talk on preparing your business for growth in the AI revolution. You've seen it, but I've extended it even further from the last time you saw it. But part of the reason I say that is I have a very personal reason of why I do what I do. My parents' business, they were immigrants from India, came here with nothing, started the first Indian vegetarian restaurant, a travel agency, small business, grew, scaled. Started working when I was 12, but in the 90s, it went close to bankruptcy. Everything closed. Lots of personal things occurred at the house. And I learned at a young age, like, man, like when businesses do well, there's a whole level of confidence and swag, and there's just that momentum. But most businesses don't do well, right? And there's a real humbling of really understanding what it means to run a business when you're not making money, right? Or your health is in jeopardy, or things are just not where they are aligned in your relationship. And I could keep going. And so when I was doing the work on AI, I was like, man, at that time in the 90s, we were going through a digital revolution. And that's when all of a sudden Google Ads and, all the new segments were coming out. Like, there was no Expedia and TripAdvisor and Kayak. So if you think about both of my parents' businesses, they weren't savvy about the transformation that was happening, right? And so they weren't into the ads. They were just like, they were the pioneers in the DC area, and they did well for a long time until they didn't. The travel agency model completely shifted because it went from, having to use like the phone to call and here's what we need to, hey, let me Google you or let me get you in kayak in 2 minutes, right? That's what's happening again in a much more dramatic, fast-paced way. And so for those of you listening, I think unique is so much more important today than it's ever. I use this AI revolution of like, you got to get your business model and your brand positioning and all that straight so that you know where you stand in the marketplace, but start to educate yourself on what's happening with these tools in the marketplace. Life and business is about efficiencies and like making your life also easier. You could have higher margins. You can have better customer experiences, right? You can really just, hiring is always a big thing, and like there will be, what's happening right now is that you're not going to need to hire as many people. You can do things like one of the things, I don't know if you know who Peter Diamandis is. He's one of the co-founders of Singularity University. These are people who are like top people when it comes to future stuff, right? But his whole, he shared in the next 3 to 5 years, there will be a unicorn company, $1 billion company with 3 full-time employees and the rest using AI bots and agents, right? And I just need you guys to, again, this is a strategic conversation, but the whole point of even me saying that is there are things that you're doing in your business, daily tasks, that very, very soon, if not already today, you can use ChatGPT, you can use Otter AI, you can use, I just found a tool that would take like the content that I created and make 10 reels off of it in 30 seconds, like crazy, right? And so I'm a big believer, educate and play internally, see what you guys can leverage to make your life easier in business. And over time, get your clear on your business model and your brand positioning. That's the unique method, right? But really go into, in the future, you might actually create things, because there are things that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop, that now there's like, you can literally talk to text and create apps and solutions. That's a whole different podcast.
Yes.
Happy to chat about that, Nate.
Yes.
Like literally, once I get into magic and what's happening in that company, like it blows me away, but there is a revolution happening. And that's why stepping back, going back to what you said originally, right? And honing in on what makes you unique and different, knowing that now there are all these other factors that are in the marketplace, not just the regular competition, right? It's really important to do at this stage.
Seema, man, we could go for days. I love your brain. I said that before. You're so important in this journey. And I'm so glad that you and I are connected and we're able to broadcast your message and the opportunities. We'll make sure that we share in our show notes how to find you as well, and just the good that you're doing in the world, Seema. And so I just want to thank you for that. But before we wrap up this segment, and then thank you for allowing me to pre-invite you to do this again, because I do want to have these, especially the conversations around tech and how we're able to utilize that, because I think more and more entrepreneurs, we've got several different camps we're in, right? We're in the camp of, boy, AI is a new tool. It's revolutionary. It's pivotal. It's the next, era, if you will, in our growth as a species. The other side is, well, one of the reasons why our growth as a species has been dominant on this planet is because of our intellectual ability, i.e., our brains we're smarter than the other animals. So that means that we can dominate. So AI will eventually be smarter than us. So there's a fear there that we may no longer have the upper hand or control, i.e., Terminator or whatever post-apocalyptic movie you want to throw in there, right? And there are conversations around that. However, today, AI is here. It is a tool, and utilizing it for the ways that we can, just like using our cell phone, right? Or using the internet. To think, for many of us, not for all of us, but for many of us, going back to the old ways, pre-internet, would be unthinkable, right? Having to go to the library. Did you have to go to the library when you were young?
Of course.
Of course you did, right? Did you have an encyclopedia when you were
Botanica, we had all the sets.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, those ways are old ways and they would be unthinkable today. And just like with AI on this new sort of, this new cusp of our evolutionary journey as, and from a technological perspective, we need to know, what the future will hold. Especially, I see, look, my screen is blurring out. Maybe AI is secretly blurring my screen out on the Zoom call that we have. Nonetheless, as we wrap up, I just want to ask you this. Oftentimes, I ask a guest to answer a specific question for me, and it's regarding the end of the journey. And I love to hear this response from folks who I get to interview. Is this, one day you'll be at the we call it the Great Summit, the very top of the peak of life, where you got to experience all things life has to offer. And you look back on all the things you did and all the people who you had the blessing and the privilege of, as you said, impacting. And I like to ask this. It's a deep question, but what is one thing you would like to have people have remembered you by?
One thing. So actually somebody asked me this at another podcast, and I think the word good human is always it's a brand I want to start, because there's something about attracting good humans with other good humans. And I mean, that to me, I'm trying to solve a real problem with business, right? And I really, truly, using AI technology, I'm going to take Unique to a whole other level. That is my goal. I think I can help and support hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of entrepreneurs over the years, leveraging this methodology, right? So they get that, right? But at the end of the day, I want to be known as a good human. I think values and why we do what we do is so important. So, I have 2 kids, I have a family. So it's making sure that my values are so clear and why I do what I do is so clear to support others. That is really important to me.
Well, you are on your way. Thank you, Seema. Thank you for joining me and our listener today. You're so helpful, and you blessed us.
Thank you. Thank you, Nate, for having me. I really appreciate you.
Well, my friend, we did it. I'm so honored you were able to join me on this episode of A Call to Leadership. Now, this might not be for everyone, because you really have to be in a certain place in order to take the kind of steps to level up your leadership. And I want you to be taking steps. You who feel like you're ready for something like this, you can go to our website, greatsummit.com. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. You and I will get to spend some time together and really focus on aiming for greatness.